This brings us to our last session of the day, in which I'm going to do another interview slot with two of my good friends, both past chairman of Entrepreneurial Exchange. You know them both, so I'm not going to give too much of an introduction at this point, but please welcome to the stage, well, who's it again? Oh, Jim McColl and Bob Keiller.
Just sit down here.
Just grab a seat down here. Well, just sit next to Jim as well.
There.
Just
I can sit next to
no, better if you would
guys,
you
you know.
And
the
just, Brian, I just apologise. If you just lean forward a minute. Hello, boys.
Very witty.
And while I'm at it, would you like anything from my trolley?
Aye.
I've got a wee Fanta. No. You're watching that? Diet Coke?
Diet Coke, whatever.
That's fine.
Thank you, my friends.
No, what? Diet Coke? No, you're fine. Okay. Good.
You can move across now.
So,
it's done his joke. Right, it's done his joke.
You can split up a bit now. Great. So, an amazing day, as ever. What I thought we'd do with the last session, rather than, I know you're going to be disappointed, I don't want you to tell your story for the 35,000th time each. I think everybody's well aware of the kind of entrepreneurial journeys that you guys have been on. More reflect about what we've seen today and heard today, and really talk about this challenge about how we grow from an amazing base. 20 years of sort of entrepreneurship that I've personally been involved in, and I've seen a huge change. Great to hear Bill talk about the fact that, the data shows we're bloody good at startup. We're getting amazing results, and there's no one in this room or beyond would say we should stop doing that. Let's keep that flow going. But we can clearly see now the gap is the big world-class scale-ups, and how we do that. I mean, from the perspective of both of you, not only successful entrepreneurs, but successful in building serious businesses of scale. Giant numbers of employees, both of you, different approaches to it. Both, interestingly, not necessarily organic. Which again, we always have a pre-election to saying, yeah, it's great, 2 guys in the garage, and 2 guys in the garage turn into 20 guys in a wee shed, and that turns into 200, and before you know it's 20,000. That's not the normal way. There are other ways to get to business scale, both of which you've done. Also, as we go through this, Bob, really would like to reflect on your new journey that you're embarking on as chair of Scottish Enterprise, and not necessarily to put you on the spot in that role and with that official hat on, but clearly we all believe that the government and the government's agencies have a key role to play here, so it'd be good. But Jim, can I maybe start with you? Your thoughts about, was it always businesses of scale for you, or did that come later?
No, I think it probably started that way. When I bought into Clyde Blowers, it was a really small company, and my goal was to scale it. There were 8 companies playing in that space. And I thought there was a consolidation opportunity. So, my goal was to try and scale it. So I went to speak to everyone, not expecting them all to sell. And over a 5-year period was able to get 6 of the remaining 7 to sell. And that kind of started the pattern for what followed.
And was that, your days effectively as a consultant and accountant that gave you the mindset that that's what you should do, rather than, well, if I can just get a business generating a decent bit of profit, I'll be happy and I can fund a good lifestyle? Well,
it probably started with, I was asked this earlier on in an interview, and I was really interested in cars when I was younger, and I wanted to have a better car. So you need to make more money. And, then you think about how to make more money. It is difficult, I think, to scale things. It's more difficult to scale things organically. It takes a long time. You can shortcut that, I think, if you buy over inefficient businesses and put them together and get synergies in there. And I suppose that came from not just the consultancy side, but went to university after doing my apprenticeship, but then I did an MBA as well, and you talked about, all the different techniques that you use. So I suppose I built my knowledge about theoretically how you do it, and probably was too inexperienced at the time to think that it didn't work. So you just go ahead and do it.
So, Bob, you obviously built a career in oil and gas in large corporates, and then the opportunity arose, and the rest is history. PSN came out and off you went. But from the moment I met you, there was always a real sense of global ambition, and actually there's no point in doing this if I'm not going to be globally ambitious. Again, is that something that you feel just came from working in big companies and having that culture, and how do we get that into earlier stage businesses that we have here?
I think there's a couple of things, Chris, is that when I was working for people and I was watching how they ran the businesses I was in, it was pretty underwhelming at times, and I'm thinking, surely you could do better than this. And I thought, what is it? There's no secret sauce there about running a big company. As somebody said there, you genuinely need good management to hold it together, and you need good leadership to keep it going forward. And you need innovation to make sure that it doesn't get stale. But ultimately, I was watching them thinking, there's nothing secret in here. You don't need to be an expert in accounts. You don't need to be an expert in insurance. You don't need to be an expert in... There's lots of terminology to confuse stuff and things like that. So when the opportunity arose and we were able to buy a business and create a business of scale by carving it out of another big business, they say, well, there's no reason why this business shouldn't grow significantly. And we had a 5-year plan. So we started the plan on the 20th of April 2006, I suppose. And the 1st of May, we managed to kind of create the business. And 5 years later, our plan was we were going to float the business on the London Stock Exchange. Fantastic plan that failed miserably. And it failed miserably because we didn't know that the credit crunch and the financial crisis was coming. So we ended up going to plan B. I'd raised another 100 million, and I was going to add on 4 bolt-on companies at that time. I'd done 2, and then my investor base fell apart. And they said, we want our money back. We want you to sell the business. We don't care how much we get for it. We're under crisis. You've got to sell the business. And I had to dig in and say, no. You'll have to come and drag it from me screaming and kicking rather than do that. So we went back to plan B, which is we're now organic only. And then we thought, you know what we should do? We should get rid of a lot of these venture capitalists that are in the business, and we should refinance the business. But we also found at the time that required all the existing shareholders to want that to happen. So I went out and spoke to 60 different venture capitalists and private equity houses, narrowed it down to 3, got 2 of them really close to the hook of doing it, and then went back to my investors and they said, no, we're not going to do it. We still want you to sell your business tomorrow and give us the money back. And we said, okay, so that's plan C gone as well. Plan D was a trade sale. And plan D was a trade sale that said, what I need to have is a business here that looks as though it could be huge. And actually, interestingly, one of the things, and this is Chatham House rules here, nobody's going to say anything outside this room, but I know that for a fact, it always happens here, is that even things like, we called the business PSN, Production Services Network, because network sounded bigger. And it came from, I did some work with a company in Manchester years ago called RMRI, Risk Management Research Institute. And when I first met these guys, they did a great job. And it was safety stuff they were doing for me and some safety case stuff that I was doing offshore. And I thought, Risk Management Research Institute. This sounds like a big building in Manchester somewhere where they've got all these professors doing experiments in that. And I said, I'll come and see you. No, don't come and see us. I said, no, I'm in Manchester, I'll come and see you. It was 2 men and a dog in an attic in RMRI. So I wanted all the attributes of being a really big company so that it made us really attractive to a potential vendor, a buyer, whether that buyer was ultimately going to be the public markets or was going to be a trade sale. So when it came to doing the trade sale, we eventually sold the business to Wood Group. They said it was the easiest due diligence they'd ever done because we were ready. We had the data rooms ready, we had all the files available, we had complete, and somebody else mentioned it earlier on there, we had the complete minutes of everything, we had the board structure in place, we had the audits all completed, totally ready to be sold. So it was dead easy to sell at the price that we demanded. But the price we demanded was never going to be what it could be unless we had competition. So I got 2 people to fall in love with the business. And I got them competing against each other, and that drove the price up and up and up until eventually we sold it for £1 billion.
Any regrets, Bob?
Yeah. Actually, when it came down to the point of selling the business, I wasn't ready to do it. My team round about me were. They said, we've done 5 years. It was a 5-year plan. We've had 5 years of growth, even through a period of recession. We've now got the chance to actually take some cash off the table, pay back what we owe, and create some personal wealth for lots and lots of people. And I'm saying, yeah, but we can do better. We can hang on in there, and we could do better than this. And I thought, as the CEO of the business, I could have said, I'm not playing, it's my game, and threw the toys out of the pram and said, no. But actually, it's a team effort. And I had to respect the wishes of the team and say, look, if the team want this to happen, I'm fairly sure that other shareholders will bite my hand off when I say we're going to do it. I thought, I've just got to actually, basically suppress my own wishes and say, you do it for the team. You came in as a team, you go out as a team, and you do it and you make it work. Now, the advantage this gave to my colleagues was they were able to do the deal 5 years ago and were able to saunter off and do their own thing. I had to stay for 5 years afterwards in the company I sold it to, can't allow them to do that. But that was part of the deal, and I made more money out of it than they did as a consequence.
Jim, I mean, as ever in your portfolio, there's tons of amazing businesses and all sorts of really interesting things. Sure, many that I don't even know about. But the one we hear most about at the moment in Scotland is Ferguson. Was that a classic case of heart over head?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there was a big part of the heart in it because, Glasgow is well known for its shipbuilding industry, and at one time I think it was building over 50% of the world's tonnage. 40 shipyards, all busy, and over the years that's declined, and this was the last merchant shipyard on the Clyde, and I thought, this isn't right. I'm an engineer, I travel around the world, we've got businesses all over the world. We can do things as well as anywhere else. We can compete with the Germans, with the Dutch, the Italians. Why is this not successful? And I went to looked at the market. It's a big thing about all the businesses we look at, really try and understand the addressable market, the available market. What's the pricing like? Could we do something here? And it was amazing, the opportunities. I mean, we bought it with 5 people in it, and we've got 250 today, a year and a half later. And we need another 150, and we can't get them, we can't get the skills. We're having to take on labour from overseas, from an agency. So we've got Romanians and Poles, which we have to put in the night shift because we don't want them working with the workforce in Port Glasgow, because it might cause some trouble. But you come in the morning and twice the amount of work's been done during the night than it's been done during the day. But it's really, really exciting, and it's not rocket science. It's just organising. Anybody that's from round about that area, you'll see that we've knocked down all the buildings. We're rebuilding the yard into a modern yard. And I'll tell you, one of the first things I did when I went down to look at the first ship we were building, I was down talking to the welders, and you build these ships in sections, and you put them out onto the slipway, and then you weld them together. So this guy's welding the section of the first ship, the first section, and I went to talk to him about it. And I went in the next day and I found he had welded it all up, and then he had split it in two. And he said, oh yeah, we need to split it in two to lift it, to get it out the door, because the crane went up in 1912 and it's been derated a few times since. I said, well, why don't we look at getting a new crane? What's the weight of it? And I said, what's more, why don't we build a bigger segment? Because I'd been over looking at Samsung in Korea, how they did it. Why don't we build a bigger one? Then we have less work to do outside. So we can't do that. The door's too narrow. So we put in a new crane, a wider door, And we finished the ship 6 months ahead of the delivery date, and we had worked out the hours we needed based on what we had done before. That's how we got to the delivery date. So, you know, there's simple things, and people, you know, the amount of people that got on to me and said, "What the hell are you thinking about? You know, what, you're buying a shipyard. I mean, shipbuilding's dead." It's not. But we get this mass hysteria, you know, that everybody buys in to the soundbite, and they don't actually examine the market and the fundamentals and the opportunity. And there's a huge amount of work out there.
How far do you think it can go in Scotland?
Well, I think we can really take this. We've got a 5-year plan that could take the workforce up to 1,300. But there's a fundamental problem we've got. When you build ships, you have to put down, you get paid 20%, and then 80% you get after it's built. Now, if you want the 80% in progress payments, you've got to get a bank guarantee. Nobody will write a bank guarantee for a company that's just out of administration. 2 ships we've got just now, £97 million. And I was determined we're going to do it. The company's had to put up 50 million cash collateralised guarantee. Now, it's nuts, you wouldn't do it. But what I found was that the competition that we were against in Poland, in Germany, and we've got a big company in Finland, and I know how it works in Finland with Finnvera, the government back the guarantees that banks give. And particularly in Finland, Germany, France, Italy, they've got a specific guarantee that they have for shipbuilding. So we went over to see Finnvera in Finland, speak to the people there and said, you know, you've got this system. If you speak to civil servants in the UK, it's government, this is government, state aid. We can't do it. They blame the European Union. The guy in Finnvera says, oh, if we didn't have this system, we wouldn't have a shipbuilding industry. He said, and anyway, we're just doing it the same way. It's the same scheme that's approved by Europe that the Italians have got, the Germans have got, the French have got, and nearly everybody else in Europe. I said, well, why have the UK not got it? Because nobody's pushed for it. That's why our industrial sector has shrunk, because we don't have an industrial policy and we don't have support for industry. So I'm now lobbying John Swinney, well, I was lobbying him, I hope he gets voted back in and gets back into job, about we need to put something in place. There's a way to do it. You can get it approved by Europe, and if you don't do that, you're not going to have a shipbuilding industry. So we will need to go into smaller orders, repairs, upgrades, because we can't keep building the order book. But if we can put it in place, we could have 1,300 employees down there and a really buoyant business. And we know what to do to make that happen.
Great. So the key piece of economic development policy that would just change an industry.
Yes.
Which I suppose Bob
could help out in his new
nicely
job.
Brings us right. Nicely brings
an
us
80 million guarantee, Bob.
So Bob, I mean, you know, there's lots of people. You'll hear lots of pubs and boardrooms and cafes across Scotland. We'll have a good bitch and moan about what Scottish Enterprise hasn't done for them this week or otherwise. But actually, do you know what? My experience, I think all of our experience, they've done some fantastic things. Not least of which, you know, creating and then spinning out SEP, which is the main VC behind Skyscanner, amongst others, you know, incredibly successful. Laterally, Scottish Investment Bank using co-investment in a way that's, I think, been world leading. You know, SDI's done some great work. There's loads of great stuff happens. But I suppose the thing I would love to know is, do you and your board, your exec team and the government that's behind the organisation think you can really make a big strategic step change and actually scale up the ambition of Scottish Enterprise?
Well, there's a couple of things in there, Chris. I mean, it's been interesting today that I think everybody, apart from one, has mentioned the support they've had either through SDI or through Scottish Enterprise, and SDI is actually managed and run by Scottish Enterprise. So it kind of shows the impact it has, and I'm sure it would have been the same last year and the year before there as well. I've gone in there as a newbie. In 30 years of business, I don't think I ever touched the Scottish Enterprise or knew what they did or went near them at all when I was opening up businesses in Kazakhstan or doing business in Chad or Nigeria, whatever. I just thought this was a public sector thing that wasn't for us, it wasn't for me at all. And I think that's a shame, in the sense that people don't know what it's there for, what it does, and what it can do, even in its current form. The other part of the question, could it be doing more? That really is a political question. And there's lots more it could be do if there was a political will.
I thought you were going to say to me that is an ecumenical matter.
That's an ecumenical matter. Yes. Yeah, thank you, Father Ted. I'll explain it to you in Father Ted terms. This is a small cow. That's a faraway cow. But no, actually, as the chairman of an organisation, I go in and I say, well, what's the remit that's been given by the shareholders in the business? The shareholders in this business is the government. If the government says, that's what we want you to do, and that's the budget you've got to do it, you say, well, okay, that's what we'll do. Now, we can have the conversation that says, boss, we could do more. But at the end of the day, it's not for the agency to define its role. It's for the government to say how many agencies should there be, what their role should be, and how much funding they should have. So I think you have to address the question, we all have to address that question, back to the politicians.
And I suppose that comes to one of the things we're going to be doing today. I mean, as I've trailed a few times as we got Entrepreneurial Scotland together, and we're trying to think about how we take a scale-up attitude to Entrepreneurial Scotland in a number of ways. One of the things that became clear was a lot of the really senior entrepreneurial talent that's in Scotland, not least of which on the seats beside me, give a huge amount back to the work that we do at Entrepreneurial Scotland, to many other initiatives, but actually, do we collectively harness the power of that? And I kind of put forward to the board here, I said, I don't think we do. I think we could do a lot more. I think we could find entrepreneurial talent of the kind we saw demonstrated by Stephen today, that sits, and Rod, sits in public sector, and really try and get this ambitious scale into people's heads. So the fellows, the idea of creating a fellowship of Entrepreneurial Scotland was created. We're going to have a quite tight, small summit meeting between the end of the conference and dinner tonight, to really get that group together, get a group of about 10 of us together for the first time to say, right, is this a good idea? If it is a good idea, who else should we get here? And also, we believe the exec team and the board of Entrepreneurial Scotland wants to put on the table that scaling up Scotland, and this is to your point, is what we should be focusing on. And if we really believe that, can the talent in that room start to influence and work with the talent in this room and beyond to start to do things like change government policy? Because I suppose, and I'll put this one to you, Jim, I mean, I suppose the logical conclusion of what, of the output of what Bob suggested, if we did go to Scottish Government, what we're saying is, look, we want a healthier, fairer, wealthier Scotland. That's got to come from the engine room of the economy. And that engine room of the economy, as you've just said, potentially lacks the talent source to fuel it. And actually, yep, we get the fact that there are many calls on the purse, public expenditure. But if we don't fuel the boiler room of education, the boiler room of all stages, and then talk about real ambitious policy, back to many people, Bill O'Lett sitting in the seat a minute ago saying, actually it's all about your ambition. Because you can do it. If you believe you can do it, if you set your goal way up there, then you'll do it. And we're probably not setting our goal high enough at the moment. So do you think, in that context of us getting together to try and create some leadership, that is the right thing to do?
Well, I think it is, but it's very difficult, to get the government to change. You hear it just now in everyone pitching for the elections. It's all soundbite politics, and some of the things they say, there's no real policy or plan behind it. More money into education, well, that's great. What are they going to do with it? It's about what happens when it goes in. It's a pet subject of mine, the education side, because, attainment is classed as achieving 5 hires or more, getting into university. I left school at 16. I couldn't have got 5 hires. I subsequently got an honours degree and 2 masters. But I couldn't have gone on and get 5 hires at the time. I wasn't ready for it. And I needed to I need to learn in a different way. We don't pay any attention. You're written off. You're not supported. And, I've pitched that to the government because, we started this school for S3 and S4 people, kids that would come from, they're in the decile. You try not to use negative language about it. They're in this. We have this Scottish index of multiple deprivation, and the number 1 quintile are the poorest ones. Well, our kids come from the number 1 quintile in that index, and these wee guys and girls are written off, and nothing's done about them. But you'll hear every party talk about closing the attainment gap, equality of opportunity. And I gave them an example. Just to highlight it. I said, in the school, and apologies to those who are not from Glasgow, because I've done areas around Glasgow, but wee Tommy from Tory Glen gets 6,500 a year spent on him by the state to educate him at secondary school. And he's probably half of that's wasted because he's dogging off and he's not going there for 2 years. And he disappears. He doesn't even get involved in training programmes or whatever. He disappears, and that's all that's invested on him. Now, Nigel from Newton Mearns, who's from a better family, he's 6 years at university, 6 years at school, and he's 4 years at university, and he gets £75,000 spent on him. Now, we've got a system that if they spend an extra 6,500 for 2 years in wee Tommy, half what they spend in Nigel, he'll get a job, he'll have a good job, a good future, and you'll change his life. And he'll come out of poverty. We're perpetuating the poverty trap. And, we've had people in for 2 years in this school, and some of the most innovative people, future entrepreneurs, are in there. And, I think we've got an untapped group that we're not addressing through the education system, where you need to get the message out, create the models that they want to follow, show them what's possible. And I think we've got a big job to do at that end as well, because if you're just looking at people, at the top end as being successful in educating people, then you're missing a big group of the people, the talent.
And I suppose what's interesting about about that whole position is back to the perspective you gave earlier. Well, there's politicians out there that say more on education, but
more.
Actually, what? And I think this comes back to what we want to try and say is Entrepreneurial Scotland. We want to be the most entrepreneurial society in the world. Well, entrepreneurial behaviour inside government and education means taking what you've already got and trying different things, finding out what works, measuring it, being ruthless and dogged, and saying, right, that works better, do more of it. And we just don't seem to have quite of the appetite. Is that what, to me, and I suppose the question, Bob, do you think that's what we can ask this whole community and expand this community to do? Actually start to demand that people act in a more entrepreneurial way?
I think, Chris, I'm getting a bit confused here in terms of some of the specific of the question. I mean, I agree totally with what Jim's saying there about actually we're defining education inappropriately.
Yeah.
We need to redefine it, and then we can define what success looks like, because the outcome is actually not about that simple metric of attainment. So I get that, and whatever we can do to change that has to be better for us collectively, and I get that. But on the other side, in terms of this idea of what do we do as an entrepreneurial community, well, one of the things is at the moment we're only a small part of the entrepreneurial community. There's lots and lots of people out there that are actually involved in entrepreneurship in different ways, both within large organisations, within the public sector and elsewhere, that are not here today.
Sure.
And if we said to them, come along and pay the fee today, they would say, you've got to be joking. There's no way I'm coming along to something like this. This is not for me. So as an entrepreneurial community, we're not remotely joined up yet. And you say we're great. Earlier on we talked about, aren't we great at startups? Well, I would challenge that as well. Because I think, if I look at the moment, how many incubators are in Perth at the moment? How many coding incubators have we got up in Stornoway at the moment? How many have we got in Dalkeith? The answer's probably 0 to all of those things. We've done some. They're giving good results, but we could do a lot more. We could do a lot more, both in universities and in schools, in terms of educating around about the potential for people to run their own business, to be entrepreneurial and things like that. So I think we need to avoid being complacent on the startup side. When it comes to the scale-up side, I think you're right. I agree with you, Chris, in the say, have we harnessed the talent appropriately? Manifestly, no. And I'll give you an example why, for instance. At the moment in Scottish enterprise, we class businesses that are what they call scaling accounts as businesses that are typically turning over 10 to 20 million pounds a year, that have an ambition in a relatively short time to be going to 50 to 100 million pounds a year or more. And we said that's what we might scale up. We don't mean somebody with a dog walking business hiring a second person. We're talking about companies that are already pretty well established, that are trying to become manifestly bigger and therefore adding real economic value into the economy. At the moment, we've got 55 of those. And when I ask the question, are all these 55 companies tapping in to all the knowledge that's out there, the black book, if you will, of the James McCallums, the Bills, all the people that are here today and beyond, and some of them who are nothing to do with Entrepreneurial Scotland, have never been members, but have still got a lot to offer. 2/3 of these companies are not getting that mentorship. And yet this is the first tranche. So there's the challenge for us, is how do we zipper this together? How do we get people doing their part, zippering it together, so we do tap in to that black book that's already out there of the Roy McGregors of this world that can come and help and support and define what that support is. Because the way we're doing it at the moment, and within Entrepreneurial Scotland, things like the evening withs and the suppers, they're great, but they're not the same as taking a company of potential scale and saying, right, we're going on a journey. And we're going on a journey together. And it's not going to be over 1 week or 1 month. This is going to be 18 months, 2 years of a journey. We're going to have to provide support in a way that we're not doing at the moment. But you know what? I think with the brains that we've got here, we can work out how to do it. And then it's just a question of, are people prepared to do it? You know, the feedback we get from the Global Scots, for instance, is often we don't demand enough of them often enough. So the thing for me on the scaling is, let's be clear on what it is we need, and let's be clear on how we get it, and let's be clear on whose job it is to actually do the matching service and get people signed up and committed. And I think we could do that.
Great. Time is marching on. You know, just to wrap up, I mean that whole challenge around scale, and the whole challenge that you actually said, Bob, which is, don't think for a second we can solve it in this room. I'm with you. I don't believe for a millisecond we can. I don't think anyone here would be daft enough to think the same. But I tell you what we can all do is we can get out there and start to influence and start to believe that we can change it. Because that to me is the part of the Entrepreneurial Scotland journey that's important, that more and more people are buying into, is actually we can get that message out. And you're dead right. We're not asking people to write a cheque to come along to events like this. We're saying, here is what it means. You know, let's show you examples. Let's show you great examples, public sector, private sector, and just look to the output and the outcomes, and actually look how well they've been rewarded. And I don't mean necessarily financially. I mean, in general, that's success. And if we can do that, then we can make this happen.
But the good thing about it, we can do it without there being an absolute sea change in any policy or funding or social thing, etc. We've already got all the component parts if we want to use them. That's where I am. We could do much more in education, we do much more on funding and support in specific sectors, but actually there's not a lot stopping us doing much better if we want to do much better.
Great. Bob, Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A couple of final things to say before we wrap up and everybody goes and does the quick Superman change and see you down for dinner. We're trying, and hopefully we will be 7 for 7:30 for dinner. Could be end up being a few minutes late, but not long. We want to be quite a sharp start tonight, so please, if you wouldn't mind being down, and those that are staying with us today, ready to go. A few thanks to be given. First of all, as ever, a thanks to the Glen Eagles Hotel for looking after us phenomenally today and providing a world-class venue, which looks by all accounts to be becoming even more world-class by the time if we come back here next year, and by the time we do that. So thanks to them. Thanks to Nigel and the production team and the team at Entrepreneurial Scotland and KL Events for putting on a phenomenal day, as you always do. David, my co-host today, it's wonderful to have you as part of the team, and it brings a little air of professionalism, shows just how good I am with it. But thank you, David. But we do have a specific thank you to give today. Probably one of the most entrepreneurial... Sorry, well, I'll let you clap all those people that I did first. Thank you. For many of you that have been involved in Entrepreneurial Scotland, Entrepreneurial Exchange for a significant amount of time, you'll know just how much work goes into the events that we have. And there's one entrepreneur that's been on the journey with us from before my time, and she's put in decades of work to Entrepreneurial Exchange and then Entrepreneurial Scotland. So I'd actually like her to come up for a second. Kylie, would you mind coming up to the stage? And I know you're going to hate me for this, but you're coming up. So don't. Come and join us for a wee seat for a second, Kylie. Come on. It was Kylie who was on eBay earlier buying airline seats and all the rest of it. So, Kylie, we have huge appreciation for everything you've done and continue to do with this conference and all our events. Amazing. As I say, it's over, how many? Is it 4 years? 23 years you've been doing it. It's just incredible. You were 12 when you started. Well, actually, you weren't 12, Kylie, because the other reason we brought Kylie up on stage today, we don't normally do this, but this weekend, ladies and gentlemen, and she won't mind me saying this because it is slightly public information, this weekend, Kylie's moving into a new decade, which she's 30. She did start at 7. And we couldn't let it go unnoticed. We're really actually proud of you, Kylie, as an entrepreneur. You've built an amazing business and you deliver for us every single time. So we thought we'd massively embarrass you and ask everyone to sing a wee happy birthday to Kylie. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kylie. Happy birthday to you. Hooray! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray! And David's got a wee extra gift for you as well. There you go. Have a great birthday.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And thank you everybody for coming.